Schilling Motors Cadillac dealership, Memphis, Tennessee, December 19, 1976. It was 2:47 in the afternoon when Elvis Presley walked through the glass doors of what had become his favorite place to shop, though he wasn't shopping for himself this time. Behind him walked a young couple, still in shock from what had happened 15 minutes earlier. The woman, Linda Thompson, a 22-year-old secretary from South Memphis, was wiping tears from her eyes. Her boyfriend, David Chen, a mechanic at a local garage, kept shaking his head in disbelief. They had been walking past Graceland's gates when Elvis, returning from a doctor's appointment, had stopped his pink Cadillac and rolled down the window. "Y'all look like you could use some cheering up," Elvis had said, noticing Linda's tears. She had just been telling David that her mother was in the hospital, and they couldn't afford the car repairs needed to visit her regularly. Their old Ford had broken down again, and David's mechanic's salary couldn't stretch to cover both the hospital bills and car repairs. Elvis had listened to their story for exactly 3 minutes. Then he had said something that would change their lives forever. "Follow me. We're going to fix this problem right now." Now, at Schilling Motors, Elvis was walking toward the showroom floor with the purposeful stride of a man on a mission. The sales staff immediately recognized him. Elvis Presley was not just their most famous customer, he was their most frequent customer. Over the past 12 years, Elvis had purchased more than 60 Cadillacs from this single dealership. But what the staff at Schilling Motors understood, and what the world was only beginning to learn, was that Elvis rarely bought cars for himself. He bought them for other people, sometimes friends, sometimes family members, sometimes employees, and sometimes, like today, for complete strangers whose only crime was being in the right place at the right time with the right kind of problem. Elvis walked directly to a brand new 1977 Cadillac Eldorado, white with a red interior. The price tag read $12,800, more than most people made in a year. He turned to Linda and David, who were still standing in the doorway, afraid to believe what was happening. "This one look good to y'all?" Elvis asked. Linda started crying again. David just stared. The salesman, Jim Hamblin, who had sold Elvis dozens of cars over the years, already had the paperwork ready. This is the documented story of Elvis Presley's most extraordinary characteristic, a generosity so profound, so spontaneous, and so consistent that it defied logic, explanation, and sometimes even his own financial well-being. Between 1956 and 1977, Elvis purchased over 100 Cadillacs, and fewer than 20 of them were for himself. The obsession began in 1956 when Elvis bought his first Cadillac, a pink 1955 Fleetwood, that would become as famous as any of his songs. But that car represented something more than luxury or status. For Elvis, who had grown up in poverty, watching his parents struggle to afford basic necessities, the Cadillac represented the American dream made manifest. "When I was a kid," Elvis once told his friend Red West, "I used to see these big, beautiful Cadillacs driving through East Tupelo, and I'd think, someday if I ever make it, I'm going to buy one of those cars. But when I finally could afford it, I realized that buying one for myself wasn't enough. I wanted to buy them for everybody who couldn't afford to buy one for themselves." The pink Cadillac became legendary. But what most people didn't know was that Elvis had actually bought 3 identical pink Cadillacs that same week. One for himself, one for his mother Gladys, and one for his girlfriend at the time, Dixie Locke. It was the beginning of a pattern that would define his relationship with material possessions for the rest of his life. Elvis didn't collect cars in the way most wealthy people collect luxury items. He collected them the way some people collect memories or experiences. Each car represented a moment of joy he could give to someone else, a problem he could solve, a dream he could make come true. The stories of Elvis's spontaneous car purchases became legendary throughout Memphis and beyond. In 1961, he bought a Cadillac for his dentist, Dr. Lester Hoffman, after the dentist mentioned that his old car was having transmission problems. In 1963, he bought matching Cadillacs for all 5 members of his regular backup vocal group, the Jordanaires, after a particularly successful recording session. But perhaps the most extraordinary example of Elvis's Cadillac generosity occurred on July 27, 1975, a day that Jim Hamblin at Schilling Motors would later describe as the most incredible sales day in automotive history. Elvis arrived at the dealership at 10 a.m. that Sunday morning with an entourage that included his father Vernon, his girlfriend Linda Thompson, and several members of the Memphis Mafia. He was in an unusually good mood, having just returned from a successful concert tour, and he had decided to do something special for the people in his life. "Jim," Elvis said to Hamblin, "I want to buy some cars today, a lot of cars." What followed was a 4-hour shopping spree that resulted in the purchase of 14 Cadillacs. Elvis bought cars for his bodyguards, his sound technicians, his wardrobe assistants, his cook, his groundskeeper, and several friends who happened to be with him that day. He even bought a car for a young woman who worked at the dealership service department, telling her, "You've been taking care of my cars, now I'm going to take care of you." The total cost was $168,000, equivalent to nearly $800,000 in today's money. Elvis paid in cash, from a briefcase he had brought specifically for that purpose. But Elvis's Cadillac generosity extended far beyond his immediate circle. The stories of him buying cars for strangers became part of Memphis folklore, documented by recipients, witnesses, and local media. In 1974, Elvis was leaving a restaurant in downtown Memphis when he encountered an elderly African-American woman, Mrs. Dorothy Johnson, waiting at a bus stop in the rain. Elvis stopped and offered her a ride, and during the drive to her home learned that Mrs. Johnson was a retired schoolteacher who had spent 40 years educating children in Memphis's segregated school system. "Mrs. Johnson," Elvis said as they pulled up to her modest house, "you've spent your life taking care of other people's children. It's time someone took care of you." The next day, a 1974 Cadillac DeVille was delivered to Mrs. Johnson's address, fully paid for, with insurance covered for a full year. The only condition was a handwritten note from Elvis. "For a true lady and a real teacher, thank you for everything you've done for our community." Mrs. Johnson, who lived to be 94, kept that Cadillac until the day she died, and she kept Elvis's note framed on her mantle. She would tell anyone who would listen, that young man understood that respect and kindness matter more than fame or money. The motivation behind Elvis's extraordinary generosity was complex and deeply rooted in his own experiences with poverty and struggle. According to those closest to him, Elvis never forgot what it felt like to want things his family couldn't afford, to see his parents work multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Elvis had what you might call survivor's guilt, observed Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis's personal physician and friend. He couldn't understand why he had been blessed with so much success and wealth when so many good people had so little. Buying cars for people was his way of trying to balance the scales, to share his good fortune with others. But there was another dimension to Elvis's car-buying compulsion that revealed something profound about his personality. He was genuinely happier giving than receiving, and he took enormous pleasure in seeing other people's joy and surprise when he did something unexpected and generous. Charlie Hodge, who traveled with Elvis for most of his career, witnessed dozens of spontaneous car purchases over the years. "Elvis would light up when he bought someone a car," Hodge recalled. "I mean, he would be more excited than the person receiving it. He loved the look on people's faces, the disbelief, the gratitude, the tears of joy. That reaction meant more to him than any applause he ever received on stage." The Cadillac preference itself was deliberate and symbolic. Elvis could have bought people any luxury car, but he consistently chose Cadillacs because they represented to him the pinnacle of American automotive achievement. The cars were big, comfortable, reliable, and immediately recognizable as symbols of success and quality. Elvis believed that everyone deserved to feel like a king or queen, at least for a little while, explained Jerry Schilling, a longtime member of Elvis's inner circle. And in 1970s America, nothing made you feel more important than driving a Cadillac. Elvis understood the psychology of it. He wasn't just giving people transportation, he was giving them dignity, status, and a tangible symbol that they mattered. Elvis's relationship with Schilling Motors became so close that the dealership essentially functioned as his personal car supplier. Jim Hamblin kept detailed records of every purchase, and those records, discovered in the dealership's archives in 1995, reveal the staggering scope of Elvis's automotive generosity. Between 1960 and 1977, Elvis purchased 89 Cadillacs from Schilling Motors alone. He bought additional Cadillacs from dealerships in Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Nashville, bringing his lifetime total to well over 100 cars. The records show purchases ranging from single cars for individual recipients to bulk orders for entire groups of people. The most expensive single purchase was in December 1976, when Elvis bought a custom Cadillac Seville for $18,000 and had it specially modified with gold-plated interior trim, custom leather seats, and a state-of-the-art sound system. The car was a Christmas gift for his father, Vernon, who had mentioned admiring the Seville's elegant design. But Elvis's favorite purchases were the spontaneous ones. The cars he bought for people on the spur of the moment because he saw a need or wanted to celebrate something special in their lives. These purchases revealed a man who was constantly looking for opportunities to make other people happy. The staff at Graceland became accustomed to Elvis's sudden announcements that he was going car shopping. Mary Jenkins, who worked as a cook at Graceland for over a decade, recalled, "Elvis would come into the kitchen and say, 'Mary, I'm going to Shillings. Anyone here need a car?' He was always serious about it. If you said yes, you were going to get a car. No questions asked." The psychological impact of Elvis's generosity extended far beyond the practical benefits of owning a reliable car. For many recipients, Elvis's gift represented validation, recognition, and inclusion in a way that transformed their self-perception and their relationship with success. Barbara Pittman, a secretary at American Sound Studio where Elvis recorded many of his songs, received a Cadillac from Elvis in 1969 after he learned that she had been taking 3 buses to get to work every day. Years later, she reflected on what the gift meant. "Elvis didn't just give me a car. He gave me back 2 hours of my life every day. And he gave me respect. When I drove that Cadillac to work, people treated me differently. They saw me as someone who mattered, someone who was valued. That changed everything about how I saw myself." The stories of Elvis's car generosity spread throughout the entertainment industry and beyond, inspiring other performers and celebrities to engage in similar acts of largesse. But few could match the consistency, spontaneity, and personal involvement that characterized Elvis's approach to giving. The famous incident at the Denver Cadillac dealership in 1976 exemplifies Elvis's approach to spontaneous generosity. Elvis was in Colorado for a concert when he decided to visit a local Cadillac dealership just to look at the new models. While he was there, he overheard a young couple discussing whether they could afford a used Cadillac that was on the lot. The couple, newlyweds who were both teachers, had been saving for months to buy a reliable car, but even the used Cadillac was slightly beyond their budget. Elvis listened to their conversation for a few minutes, then approached the salesperson. "I'll take that car they're looking at," Elvis said, "and I'll take a new one for them too. And give me the keys to that new Eldorado over there." Within an hour, Elvis had purchased 3 cars. The used Cadillac the couple had wanted, a brand new Cadillac for them to actually drive, and a luxury model for himself. The couple, who had never heard of anyone buying cars for strangers, initially refused to accept the gift. Elvis's response, as recalled by the salesperson who was present, revealed his philosophy about generosity. "Look, I've been blessed with more than I could ever need. You're both teachers, which means you're spending your lives helping other people's children learn and grow. That's important work, and important work should be rewarded. Please let me do this for you." The couple accepted the cars, and they kept in touch with Elvis through letters for several years. They named their first child after Elvis, and sent him photos and updates about their family. Elvis kept their letters and photos in a special box at Graceland, treasuring the connection he had created through a simple act of generosity. By the mid-1970s, Elvis's car buying had become so frequent and well-known that Schilling Motors assigned a dedicated salesperson, Tom Diskin, to handle Elvis's purchases. Diskin's job was to maintain an inventory of cars that Elvis might want to buy on short notice, and to be available whenever Elvis decided to go car shopping. Elvis never planned these purchases. Diskin later explained, "He would call and say, 'I'm coming over and I need 7 cars,' or 'I want to look at something special for someone special.' My job was to be ready for anything and to make sure we had enough selection that Elvis could find exactly what he wanted for whoever he was shopping for." The relationship between Elvis and Schilling Motors became so close that the dealership essentially functioned as an extension of Elvis's household. When Elvis was on tour, members of his staff would sometimes handle car purchases on his behalf, using his account and following his general guidelines about what types of cars to buy for different types of recipients. The record-keeping at Schilling Motors provides fascinating insights into Elvis's thinking about cars and generosity. The sales records show that Elvis typically chose different models for different types of recipients. For family members and very close friends, he usually selected the most luxurious and expensive models available. For employees and acquaintances, he chose mid-range Cadillacs that were still impressive but not ostentatious. For strangers and casual recipients, he often chose elegant but practical models that would serve their needs without overwhelming them. The color choices were also deliberate. Elvis rarely bought dark or conservative colors, preferring bright, cheerful shades that would bring joy to their owners. White, gold, light blue, and pink were his favorite choices, colors that he felt would make people smile every time they saw their cars. Elvis's generosity with Cadillacs continued right up until his death in 1977. Just 2 weeks before he died, Elvis purchased a Cadillac Seville for Dr. Elias Ghanem, a Las Vegas physician who had provided medical care during one of his concert residencies. The car was delivered to Dr. Ghanem's office with a note thanking him for his professionalism and caring. When Elvis died on August 16, 1977, He owned 17 Cadillacs himself, and there were at least 35 people driving Cadillacs he had purchased for them. The cars represented a tangible legacy of his generosity that continued long after his death. Many of the recipients of Elvis's Cadillacs kept their cars for decades, treating them not just as transportation but as treasured mementos of their encounter with one of the most generous people they had ever met. Some of the cars are still in the possession of the original recipients or their families, carefully maintained as family heirlooms. The impact of Elvis's automotive generosity extended beyond the individual recipients to the broader Memphis community and the American automotive industry. Schilling Motors became one of the most successful Cadillac dealerships in the country largely because of Elvis's patronage, and other Memphis businesses benefited from the economic activity generated by Elvis's purchases. More importantly, Elvis's example of spontaneous, generous giving inspired countless other acts of kindness and generosity. People who witnessed Elvis's car giving or heard stories about it were motivated to find their own ways to help others and share their good fortune. The psychological analysis of Elvis's compulsive generosity reveals a complex personality driven by genuine empathy, survivor's guilt, and a deep need to make meaningful connections with other people. The cars were not just gifts. They were vehicles for creating relationships and sharing experiences. Elvis understood something that most wealthy people never learn, observed sociologist Dr. Margaret Walsh, who studied celebrity philanthropy. He understood that the greatest luxury is the ability to make other people happy. His car purchases weren't about showing off his wealth. They were about using his wealth to create joy and opportunity for others. The stories of Elvis's 100-plus Cadillacs reveal a man who was fundamentally different from his public persona. Away from the stage and the recording studio, Elvis was not the king of rock and roll seeking adulation and worship. He was a profoundly generous human being looking for ways to use his extraordinary success to improve other people's lives in concrete, meaningful ways. The legacy of Elvis's Cadillac generosity lives on in the dozens of people whose lives were changed by his spontaneous acts of kindness, in the dealership records that document his extraordinary giving, and in the ongoing influence of his example on how successful people can use their wealth and influence to benefit others. Elvis Presley bought more than 100 Cadillacs in his lifetime, but he never really bought them for himself. He bought them for the joy of giving, for the pleasure of seeing other people's happiness, and for the satisfaction of knowing that his success could create opportunities and comfort for others. In a career defined by breaking records and achieving unprecedented success, Elvis's most extraordinary achievement may have been his consistent demonstration that true wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. Every Cadillac he purchased was a testament to the generosity of spirit that made him not just the king of rock and roll, but the king of giving from the heart. The boy from Tupelo who once dreamed of owning a Cadillac grew up to become the man who made Cadillac dreams come true for more than 100 other people. That may be the most beautiful song Elvis ever created. Not with his voice, but with his heart.